Alright, well, first things we're going to start off is a basic orientation to the human body. Now, this means we need to know the basics of life. We need to know what's required for life to occur, to maintain life. We're going to talk about body systems, different things like that. So as we go through and we talk about this, keep that in mind as we hit each page. Now, first and foremost, necessary life functions. As we go through each of these, notice that there's roughly 8. This is how we categorize life. You should remember this from biology. What you want to be thinking about as you go through and you are either listening to me or pausing and writing this down is keep in mind what part of the body, when you look at the body, where do you see each of these occurring? Maintain boundaries. How important is it to maintain boundaries? What do we mean by maintaining boundaries? So when we talk maintaining boundaries, we're looking at the skin, obviously protecting us from the outer and the inner, protecting the inner part. If you go internally, you have areas where we have to maintain boundaries. In other words, we have to keep hydrochloric acid in the stomach. We don't want that escaping. You have a blood-brain barrier because we do not want cerebral spinal fluid and blood mixing. So we see boundaries in various places at different levels of anatomy. Movement, locomotion, and movement of substances. So locomotion, obviously, muscles, our ability to walk and move. Movement of substances, we need to move things through the digestive system, through the alimentary canal. Responsiveness. This is actually pretty important in terms of maintaining health. In other words, when you look at responsiveness here, the big thing that you want to recognize is when we talk about responsiveness, we are talking about responding to stimuli. Okay, so we're talking about stimuli and their effects. Now this means stimuli is both external and internal. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go. Now, digestion, breakdown, and delivery of nutrients, etc. Growth, increasing cell size and cell number. We start from a single cell. The zygote is the fertilized egg. It develops through multiple reproductions, and you go from 1 cell to 2 cells to 4 cells, and eventually we get a blastocele. Then we have metabolism, which are the chemical reactions within the body. This is literally every chemical reaction in the body. Whether we are going to be building things, okay, making body structures. Now, when we talk making, we also keep in mind we're talking maintenance, and then production of energy. That's real important to what's going on in the body. Now, excretion, elimination of waste, reproduction, production of future generations, so production of gametes, different things like that. Now, when we go into survival needs, what's interesting here is, again, maintenance of life, needs of life, survival needs. Nutrients, oxygen, water, pressure, body temperature. If we go through nutrients, obviously food's what drives all the chemical reactions, where we get all of our energy. Oxygen. The thing you should remember from biology here, remember that oxygen is that final electronic scepter for cellular respiration. Okay, so you need to remember that. Then we talk water. Again, as you can read, primary medium for most of the reactions, different things like that. Notice how much of our body weight is comprised of water. Now, water and the amount of water we have here is going to tie back in to the last point, which is body temperature. In other words, remember those properties of water from biology. Okay, it has that, high surface tension, capillary action, different things like that. That's real important in terms of the body and how we function, osmosis, things. But this one, why it's so important for body temperature, it has to do with that high heat capacity and its ability. Okay, so high heat capacity and its ability to take a lot of energy before it changes temperature. That means it has to lose a lot of energy, it has to gain a lot of energy. So we're able to maintain a very, very stable internal temperature. And then atmospheric pressure here is obviously important because we're talking about gas exchange. Okay, one of those things you should remember from physical science or physics or chemistry or anything like that, basically we're in essence looking at Boyle's law. That inverse relationship between pressure and and volume. So as we decrease the pressure in our lungs, gas rushes in because we've increased the volume. To exhale, we have to increase the pressure, which decreases the volume. And that's all that's going on for that. Now, when we talk about the human body, notice that we have two primary themes. Form and function. Okay, form and function is basically anatomy, homeostasis. We're looking at physiology. Now, when we go through anatomy, notice the parts there associated with anatomy. We are dealing with shape, structure, okay, location. All right, in other words, when we talk form and function, we're literally talking about the relationship between its structure and shape and what it does, function. So that's really what we're looking at when we talk about that. Now, homeostasis, and then basic definitions. Homeostasis then we associate with physiology. Okay, this is the how the body works. These are the chemical reactions. This is what's going on. In other words, if we're talking cellular respiration, we're talking gas exchange. Okay, the physical mechanics of gas exchange, that's anatomy. Okay, the inhalation, exhalation, the changes in the contractions of the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles that allows that change in volume and that change in pressure. The physiology is the actual chemical gas exchange of the oxygen and the carbon dioxide from the lungs across the tissue to the capillaries, as well as the actual chemical changes that allow the muscles themselves, the intercostals and the diaphragm, to contract. So there's chemical changes associated with that, and that is always going to be physiology. Now, so anatomy. Generally, gross anatomy, we're talking about the entire body. So we look at it as a gross meaning large. So what's typically easily observed, different things like that. Microscopic anatomy, we're dealing more with what we see as very small structures, so at the cellular level. All right. Now, physiology, generally, you always associate physiology with typically with specific structures or specific systems. So neurophysiology, cardiac physiology, a little trivia there. The interesting thing too, when we talk about this, a lot of this didn't appear until the 17th century, so work in your mind what year that was. And then when we talk 17th century, keep in mind what was known. Not a lot was known. We were still dealing with the fact that cadavers, people didn't mess with cadavers a lot. They were taboo, shall we say. All right, so that brings us to the basic organ systems. Now the big thing that you want to do as we go through the organ systems is you want to be tying each organ system to a specific function or survival need. In other words, as we go through this, okay, we've talked about the necessary life functions, so boundaries, movement, responsiveness, digestion, growth, metabolism, excretion, reproduction. We've talked about survival needs of nutrients, oxygen, water, atmospheric pressure, and body temperature. So as we look at those, keep in mind, where do each of these systems cover those boundaries? So you need to be linking up each system to either a survival need or you need to be linking it up with life requirements. Okay, so that means muscular system, well, that's easy to link up. When you look at what we associate with, okay, life functions, well, skeletal system, if we're looking muscles, it's movement, locomotion, and movement of substances. So that's a pretty easy one to link up. So you just want to make sure you're going through each of these as you put down the basic function, their overall purpose, link up to a survival need and a life requirement. So integumentary system, skeletal system, muscular system, nervous system, endocrine system. So integument, skin, obviously. Skeletal system, bones and joints. Muscular system, muscles, all muscles. Skeletal, which we typically are usually what we isolate when we talk muscular system, we tend to focus on the skeletal system because the cardiac we associate with the cardiovascular, obviously. Smooth you deal with all over because it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. Nervous system, that one's something you better kind of pay attention to. Nervous system is one of those things that allows us to respond to changes as does the endocrine system. Now, both of these are in essence considered control systems. Without one, we quickly deviate from homeostasis. If we deviate from homeostasis, it's always death or disease. So either one of these systems goes down, the overall body's in trouble. This nervous system, notice fast acting. Endocrine system, because it acts by way of hormones that are secreted, this is a slower process. Okay, so this is a slower acting control system as compared to the nervous. And the last bits of organ systems we're dealing with: cardiovascular, digestive, urinary, reproductive, respiratory, and lymphatic. Notice each has a specific function. And even though we deal with each of these systems separate, keep in mind there's a lot of overlap. As we just said, if something goes wrong with the nervous system and the endocrine system, it's safe to assume something's going to go wrong with reproductive, something will go wrong or could go wrong with respiratory, urinary, etc.